Recording in progress. Recording's already in progress.
Yeah. Now we're on. Sorry. All right, good evening, everyone. Today is August 19th, 2026. I'm going to call the Select Board meeting to order. This evening, we will have a joint committee meeting with the Finance Committee. So the time now is 6 p.m. for the Select Board. This evening, we have David Phil, Molly Keegan, myself, Amy Parsons, and Jason Kostick. Randy will not be joining us this evening. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, as amended, this meeting is being conducted in a remote hybrid format. The public has been given adequate alternative means of access via Zoom, as noted in the posted public meeting notice, along with access and participation instructions. As chair of the Select Board, I hereby notify all participants that this meeting is also being recorded by the town through Hadley Media and will be made accessible to the public. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, any person who intends to record or transmit this meeting must inform the chair at this time.
Is there a reason why she would be having a feedback?
I moved it back over. I wonder if it was too close to his.
Oh, okay.
I don't think there's an issue now.
No, I think you're right. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Can you call the finance?
So, sorry, 1 second. Additionally, the virtual hybrid nature of this meeting is for convenience only. The board and committee is meeting in person in a public location. In the event that there are technical difficulties, the board and committee will continue its meeting, notwithstanding the lack of continued hybrid access. All right.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know you weren't done.
No, you're good.
We'll call the Finance Committee to order tonight. In attendance, we have Harry Vondolowski, Peter Matusko, myself, Pam Haig, Amy Fiden, and Paul McCretsky.
All right, so we are going to move up public comment before the by-board meeting because we do have individuals here for public comment. Just if you're looking to speak in public comment in regards to anything that has to do with the presentation this evening, please hold off until the public comment / general questions portion of the by-board meeting. So is there anyone here this evening for non-related public comments? And if so, please come up to the microphone here.
Sharon Parsons, representing the Historical Commission. I would like to tell both boards and the town about a very, very important event that will be coming up on September 25th of this year. It turns out that a long lost member of the people who boarded the ship in the Boston Tea Party is buried here in Hadley. After the Boston Tea Party Museum did years of research, they have finally found his stone, and it is here. He is buried with his daughter, Salome Cook, and the Cook family. I'm looking for anybody in the Cook family who might actually be descended from this man. His name is Jeremiah Cook. Not only did he participate in the Boston Tea Party, but he also went to Lexington and Concord as a Minuteman, and he fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill. After that, he stopped being a Minuteman and he actually enlisted. So he's also a Revolutionary War soldier. So on September 25th, the Boston Tea Party Museum will bring 2 speakers out to the Old Hadley Cemetery. They will talk about Jeremiah Cook and they will put a marker by his stone. It will be the only Boston Tea Party marker in the Hadley Cemetery. And there's only a few west of Worcester as it is. He was just fortunate to have been in Boston that day. And when he heard about the party, he said, I think I'll join it. And he did. He was just 20 years old. And you know what 20-year-olds can do. So 2 people from Boston will be speaking. I'm looking to have someone or some of the select board be present and perhaps make a speech. I would also like the select board to make September 25th, 2026 Jeremiah Cady Day in honor of him, and so that we can have that publicity, is that we are recognizing someone who is buried in our cemetery. Further, because he was never recognized, he does not have an American Revolutionary War marker either. So the Daughters of the American Revolution will be placing his American Revolutionary War soldier marker there. And we will also have a color guard from the Sons of the American Revolution. So I'm hoping to make it a big party, really and truly, because we didn't celebrate the Declaration of Independence in any way. And this is our time to mark the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence and our freedom.
So you said the 25th?
At 11 o'clock. Yeah, and Hadley Media is planning to be there.
Sharon, was he a Hadley resident?
No, he was born in Connecticut. Somebody convinced his family there was good farmland in Shutesbury, so they moved there, and then he moved to New York when there was better farmland. But he came back to Hadley in the later part of his life. His wife had passed away, and he came to live with his daughter Salome Cook. So he lived in Hadley.
Because I will talk to you about a flag for him.
That's a great idea. Yeah,
That's my committee.
Yeah.
Sorry, Hadley Banner.
Yeah, that's a great idea. He was not a Hadley resident. Well, he was at the end of his life.
Yeah.
And of course he has, because his daughter married a cook from Hadley, and his mother was actually a cook from Hadley as well, a Warner, from Hadley. He has Hadley roots.
Awesome. All right.
From that.
I will talk to you about that.
Okay,
On the
great.
side.
I'm all set. Yep.
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
Refreshments I heard at the full meeting.
I'm hoping to have refreshments. Yes. I'm hoping to invite the 5th grade history class as well. I'm going to put a notice out to the principal rather about doing that, because the young people should see this as well as some of those older ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for public comment? All right, so we're gonna move into now 2.1, which is the presentation discussion on property assessments and real estate taxes. Perhaps Susan here, who's our town collector. And do we have anyone from the Board of Assessors here?
I thought that they were looking to have Jeff come, but it doesn't look like he's here.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Cheryl's on vacation. So
I have a little bit in my presentation regarding assessments, and I can maybe answer some of your questions. Nate had asked me to put together just kind of a bulleted thing. Now that we passed the override, what happens next? And there's quite a few things that happen next, actually.
Is there something that can we put anything on the,
you bet.
because just if there's people here walking more. There you go. All right, awesome. Sorry.
Okay. On July 1st, I issued our preliminary real estate and personal property bills. They are due August 3rd and November 2nd. If you'll remember, we always issue our preliminary bills together, and then our actual bills separately, which will be due in February 1st and May 1st. The preliminary bill, and I also had folks asking me how these things are calculated. If you look at calculating preliminary bills and you take a look at the first page, and I did our 25 and 26, it's my bill, but so if you look at the total assessment on the first page of the fiscal year 2025 actual bill, it's $7,519.01. You multiply that by 50% and you divide it by 2, and you come up with what is due for the quarterly preliminary for 2026. And on the next page, you can see that that's exactly what we have. Because of rounding, you sometimes have a penny off. So that's why I have 1879.76 and 1879.75. as the first 2 quarters of my preliminary bill for 2026. So after the bills go out, the assessor continues to work on values for submission to the Department of Revenue. Things to remember about valuations: properties are classified residential and non-residential, and non-residential encompass commercial, industrial, and mixed use. Farmland is considered commercial. Residential properties are property values are based primarily on market comparisons. Commercial property values are based on the income approach. Land value is deducted from the total income approach value. The reason for this is commercial properties don't sell with any regularity to perform a true market comparison. Any questions so far?
So I was just wondering, when I got my bill, I thought we were going to have the override amount on it. It wasn't appearing there, and I was just wondering if anybody here can shed some light as to why that didn't happen. And the reason I'm asking that question is because the override with the 2.5% is 13%. And if you delay that 2 more quarters, we're going to double that. So taxpayers are going to see like a 26% tax increase for the February and May payments. And that's quite a huge amount. Yeah, and I've just.
It is, I talked to Vadar about it, and they said if you want to do it, it's going to back you up almost until July 1st. So I wouldn't get my bills out timely. So I wasn't going to do that.
Okay.
And we did discuss that at the forums.
Yes. So once the DOR has received the various forms submitted by the assessor's office, they will certify growth and values. At that point, there are still a couple of things that need to be done. The select board has to open the warrant for town meeting. I must have been, I don't know, channeling David Nixon, because he always wanted to close the warrant by the end of August, and that's what I wrote here. So we're close, but not quite. So and prior to closing the warrant, capital planning and CPA committees will meet to discuss items on the warrant and make their recommendations. Town meeting will be scheduled and held. At town meeting, there are several things that could impact our tax recap sheet going forward. If there are any debt exclusions, or if there are any things that are borrowed within the levy, they still have to be calculated and put on the DE1, which the treasurer does. The select board then will hold a public hearing on property tax classification. They decide on various options under the classification law. They include open space, residential exemptions, and small commercial exemptions. We typically do not have any of those. We do have a CPA exemption for people over 70, but.
So the items within the levy, such as capital.
Small capital items that we're going to borrow for a year, or, yeah. And there is that amount left in the budget from year to year, so that, we don't get stuck on a generator like we did one year. The select board will also acknowledge the excess levy capacity. At this hearing, this is where the select board decide whether we're going to split the rate or keep a single tax rate. And I imagine there will be a lot of discussion in the upcoming weeks about that. The Board of Assessors typically will provide their recommendation on various tax policy options and split rate versus single rate. Once those decisions are made by the select board, the assessor then submits the classification hearing and excess levy capacity results via the LA5 to the Division of Local Services. And if anybody is interested in looking further into what's in here, you can go to mass.gov/DLS, Division of Local Services. And if you scroll down, the first thing that they have on that website is upcoming events. But then when you get down to it, they have uh, learning tools regarding municipal finance and values, more than anybody will ever want to see. Well, maybe not, but there's a lot.
I was gonna say, is there still no one here from the assessors or board of assessors, or we were hoping for people with questions?
It does not appear that there's anybody here for them.
Unfortunate. So I did have a question, and I don't know if you might be able to answer it.
I'll give it a shot.
But when, because I know we had done during COVID a split rate.
Yes.
And when we were trying to determine, how we wanted to do the percentages, isn't there like a rule where you can't go or have such a percentage range between the two of them, or you can't go up so many percentages?
And the Division of Local Service, depending on what you vote, they will, or on what the values and all of that are, they will tell you exactly what your shift can be, the minimum and the maximum.
Okay, that's what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Because during COVID, when we shifted, the reason we shifted was because the businesses, their income forms was so low that for them, if we only assessed what was due that by those figures, those values, the lion's share would have gone to the residential. And so we went ahead and shifted to business at that point, knowing that it would all come back in the next year or two. So.
Okay. That was on my brain.
Okay. The LA5 is submitted to the Division of Local Services. So now we move to the preparation of the tax rate through the tax recapitulation sheet, or as everybody knows it, the tax recap sheet. That has to be submitted to the Department of Revenue. The people responsible for that are the principal assessor and the accountant. They oversee the majority of it. I have a small, I have to do outstanding tax amounts. Dee Dee has to do the DE1, and I think that's included in here. The assessors have to estimate the amount to raise to fund the expected abatement and exemptions, which is fondly known as the overlay. And they have to prepare the OL1. The estimate of the overlay is heavily relied on based on the outcome of what the select board vote as far as a split or a single tax rate. Typically what will happen if you have moving into a split tax rate, you will often have commercial businesses that many of them they submit for an abatement and looking for some value to come off. The assessors will look at their abatement request. If there's merit, they will lower their values, the assessed value, and that's fine. If they don't, they'll deny it. And quite often the commercial business will go to the ATB. That's where it becomes very pricey, and that's where it hits our overlay. If you're looking at doing a commercial appraisal on a Stop and Shop, you're looking at $60,000 to $80,000, and plus you have legals. So that all goes into the overlay as considered. So
sounds like the commercial properties are holding us underneath the barrel because they could keep on doing this and put the town in debt, where they have all the 10,000 cars a day and they have all this exposure
And the money to fight it.
and the money to fight it, and we're the ones up against it.
So the commercial pays just about 50% of our tax levy every year. And it's a very small number of parcels compared to the residential. So they have a good burden of the tax levy already. So that's, and they certainly get hit on everything else, water and sewer. And so.
And generate what receipts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, you were saying before, when it comes to the value of the residential, it's based on comparisons. Now, you were saying when it comes to the commercial properties, based on their revenues, because they're not selling the how does that go? You were saying
So-
they deduct the.
So you don't
incomes
see,
to the-
so you don't see a mall sell with any regularity. You know, in Hadley, you see, I don't know, maybe a dozen, 2 dozen single family homes sell. So, you know, you can do a market comparison. This sold for this, therefore this style home is, that's, you know, that's a good value. But you don't see a mall sell or a Stop and Shop sell or, you know, a hotel sell. So that's why they do it on the income base.
To compare it to.
Right.
I know that Paul Benjamin shared the questionnaire that goes to the assessors out here.
Yeah.
Based on revenue, things like that.
It's the I&E form, the income and expense form. Yeah.
And put that on website, just so people see what the businesses have to go through, what the schools every year.
We could do a blank one.
Yeah.
Their I&E forms and all of that are not a matter of public record.
Well,
Yeah.
You know, we did that.
Yes, I can. So once everything has been reviewed, the tax recap is submitted to the DOR along with completed forms, documentation, and analyses. The DOR calculates the actual levy limit and then will certify the tax rate. At that point, the assessors can prepare the warrant and then they send it to me and I send out the actual tax bills. So if we go back to our calculating actual tax bills it's not complicated. It's just a couple more steps. So you take a look at, you divide the total valuation, and now we're talking home valuation. So mine last year, well, mine in 2026 was 653,700. So if you divide that, you get 653,70, multiply it by the tax rate, and the tax rate was 1146. All of this is down in this valuation section down in the bottom here. Well, you divide it by 1,000 and then multiply it by the tax rate, and you come up with a tax amount of 7,491. But when you now we have to calculate the CPA that's due for that. When you calculate residential CPA, they have $100,000 CPA exemption, residential CPA exemption. So you take the value of the property less 100,000 equals the 553,700. You divide by 1,000. You multiply that figure by the tax rate, and then you multiply that times 3%, and it will give you what the amount of the CPA is. And you can prove your math all down here. So now that the residential CPA exemption is only for residential. So for commercial properties, you simply have to take the tax rate that if my house was not, if my house was commercial, you take the 7,491 and multiply that times 3%. And that would be the commercial rate.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I know that when you talk about proposition 2.5, does that have to do, so that's like the increase every year
Yep.
to the levy limit?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
so,
That's all comes into play on the tax recap sheet.
so then technically if someone's house, so you have a levy limit, right? So like this year it was an amount, and next year it's 2.5. But we also reassessed home values.
Yep.
So technically, if your residence, that appraised value goes up by more than 2.5%, then actually the tax rate would be lower.
Exactly. That's why everybody who says to me, what do you think the tax rate's going to be? It's like,
Right.
I haven't seen values yet. So, because you always have the tax rate and the levy, and when the levy goes up, the tax rate goes down and vice versa.
Right. I think people were saying, okay, well, my house is getting assessed, at 4% more, and then you have a 2.5% on top of that. And it's like, but you don't.
No,
That's not.
yeah,
how it
that's why I won't do estimates until we get our values done, because, it's a shot in the dark. So,
Just putting that up there.
Yeah, no, it's a
It's a good
huge
point.
conception.
Yeah.
yes.
I'm sorry. Does anyone else have any questions?
I mean, I do have questions, and Sue, thank you for doing all of this and putting it together, but I think the questions I have really be more directed towards the assessors. And one of the things in the aftermath of the override and all of the meetings leading up to it that we were all having, was a question about whether or not we were undervaluing the commercial properties. That was something that people used AI or something like that. And to Sue's point on DLS, there's some really good information out there. And when you look at the trend analysis on DLS, and it was a question that I had posed to the assessors, what you actually see is that the percentage of the assessments on the commercial have actually been trending upwards.
Yeah.
Like around towards like 95%, I want to say. And residential was actually trending down closer to like 92%. So I was curious to talk to the assessors more about that, because again, I think that there's a misconception that there's, some sort of valuation inequity. And if anything.
Yeah, we're seeing that what I see from what I get, we're seeing not necessarily a decrease, but certainly a leveling off. Because at one point houses were selling here like 300,000 over assessed. It was crazy. And now we're seeing somewhere between 150 or so, but that's leveling off a little bit. And we'll see what happens, with the economy, but you've got building materials more expensive, obviously fuel, it's just everything is driven up.
Yeah, I was gonna thank Sue. I think now would be the time, Molly, if there are questions, we can record them and transmit them to the assessor and to the board. I think this is just an opportunity to have an introduction. As a by-board meeting, we're hoping to cover different topics leading up to the budget season, and this is one, and then we'll talk about capital planning in a minute. I think it's really important to, have it be recorded here too, and then the public can watch and kind of understand this. So I think if there's questions to be asked, please ask. I won't say I know all the answers about capital planning, but when I'm up there, please ask as many questions as you'd like. I think, Paul, to your point about the taxes too, when I talked to Sue, the idea about trying to assess the increase, really, it doesn't make sense until we have the tax rate and everything's done at fall town meeting. And so although it's going to hit the two tax bills, if everyone's aware of it, you start budgeting a little bit, knowing there's going to be, what the increase might be.
And to some extent, once you have the values done, you have your levy limit, you can make a better educated guess at what the tax rate will be.
But doing quarterly billing, I think it'd be hard to say, well, to get them out by July 1 to already have increased or try to, increase it based on the override is really soon.
I know they do allow you to do that.
They do.
Statutes allow that to happen. I'm just thinking of the taxpayers. That's why I brought that up.
I know.
You can get hit with a 26% increase in February and May versus a 13% increase is quite a shock for everybody. And, it's unfortunate that the software company couldn't do it. I know when I was doing this up in the city of Greenfield, we would add even the 2.5% in too, in any overrides. And it seemed to go pretty smoothly, actually, and people liked it because it was like a smoothing technique.
Yeah, I mean, definitely something worth looking at, down the road to see. But that's something we can do, and I think that's, that was why we were having a lot of conversation too for folks that, even if they have to spread it out over the 6 months or whatever, if there's a way that we can help them, as your office always has done.
Yep.
It's not gonna resolve the problem you're pointing out, Paul, but it might, maybe people can get into like a payment plan over a 6-month period rather than the 2 big chunks.
To smooth it out.
Exactly,
And also, even from the town's perspective, they'd be getting all those funds. It's like they're operating for 6 months at last year's budget,
Mhm.
even though the override passed.
Mm.
And so there's a shortfall to the town of Hadley too.
Before we switch topics, I did want to ask if there was anyone on Zoom that had any specific or any general questions in regards to tax rate and assessor related questions that we can pass along, or that Sue can answer, that she can do that now before we change our byboard meeting topic. So if you're yeah, that's
Okay.
while we're waiting for people to put their hands up if they have questions.
To Nate's point, if we want to just go on record, another thing I think it would be worthwhile having more information from the assessors on is, we've been talking about commercial abatements, and I think just abatements in general, some sort of historical perspective on residential and commercial abatement activity. Because we're talking hypotheticals, but I don't really, have a good handle on that overlay and how much has been used and all of that. I know it comes up every year in the budget, but it's more of a, general guess.
Yeah.
And we had already talked about making sure that we have a presentation prior to the day that we have to vote on things, because I thought that was so appropriate last year.
And one of the things I know you probably can't give specific information, but how many abatements, or I guess an amount of an abatement that may be granted, because there's information going around out there that every time a commercial property puts in for an abatement, we automatically grant it. So if that's true, okay, but if it's not true, that needs to be out there as well. So it's just some information to pass on.
And that's why I say it'd be good to see the residential as well.
Right.
What's the plan, our policy?
So is there anyone on the line?
I know that he's indicated
Nobody
that they
is-
have questions.
Okay, so then we can. Jack, I don't know if you have anything else. Okay. We can move to the next topic on bylaw. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for putting
Do
this
you need
together.
to stay for any reason, or, I mean,
For your pleasure.
I will go home and watch you from there.
Really appreciate that. I think it's something people, really needed. So thank you so much.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid.
Sure. I'm just gonna go to the presentation table. if That's all right. Yeah.
Sure. That's my.
So, we're moving on to 2.3. And, Nate, our town administrator, and T is here as well. Provide an update on the FY 27 capital planning process, in preparation for the upcoming special town meeting.
Oh, thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone. I don't have a small handout like Susan. Instead, I just threw a lot of paper at you for confusion. No. Some of it is capital planning is really important, and I don't want to minimize it. It's really hard to capture in 1 or 2 pages, but it is a pillar of budgeting for a local community. And so, I just really want to emphasize that. It's something that should be done every year, and it is in Hadley. And it's the implementation of of the community's goals, stated in their master plan or other plans. And it's really the administration of financial policies. And so if you're doing capital planning, you should be following your, free cash policy, your stabilization policy. And then you're trying to get things done that you want to have in your community, your services, fix your roads, your buildings, all your assets. And so that's, ideally you have the capital program, which there's a big document here from 2020 to 2030. And then you have your annual plan, which is really what we have as a spreadsheet. We ask departments to give their requests, and then we try to fund them. But in a bigger picture, capital planning is this process of identifying, how do we maintain our services, our buildings, and our assets. And that's really important. And I think moving forward, it's going to be really important for Hadley and a lot of communities as part of having a good capital plan and good policies that helps our bond rating. So Hadley has the best bond rating it can right now. That means we're attractive to banks. We get lower interest rates, but it's getting harder to have that good bond rating. And so we heard from our financial advisors at a meeting the other week that it's not, some of it's what the town can control and some of it's external factors, what's happening with the economy, economic outlook, new growth. If we're not having new growth every year, that can actually hurt our bond rating. And so I just want to say all these pieces are really important. The levy, through taxes also determines how much you can then borrow to fund your capital plan. And so big picture, we have, a capital planning committee formed by law. It's statutorily, they have the power to make recommendations to town meetings. So they were formed 20 years ago. And so some communities don't have a capital planning committee. They could designate the select board, the finance committee, but in Hadley, we have a capital planning committee. So, if we're taking big picture, now we're going down to, to the annual cycle, we just started it. We go through our annual Springtown meeting, we set the budget, and then we ask department heads to make requests on what they'd like to see funded for the fiscal year we're in right now. So we're in FY27, began July 1st, runs through June 30th. We do that so that we have a better estimate on what we have for free cash, what our budgets are, and what's available funding. We can't fund everything, right? So we ask the departments to make requests. And so there's a big spreadsheet showing what are 10 years worth of requests. It's $40 million. It actually will be more given, what we need to do for our water and sewer systems. And it seems overwhelming. The whole point of doing this is to figure out how do we fund it. And so I think the town's done a great job of having a capital process every year and having a plan. The plan should be updated. It is every year, not just a spreadsheet, but the actual program document. We have policies that are 20, 25 years old. We could revisit those. And so those policies say really important things. And that's where, just stepping back a minute, it is okay to have debt. It's okay to have, a few kinds of debt. It's just like, if you think of your personal savings, you might have a savings account that you use for small things. That could be within the levy or free cash, right? And then you might have a separate savings account that, you pay off your car loan and you want to prepare for your next car. So keep making a payment into this separate savings account so you can draw on that when you need it. And that could be like a capitalization fund, right? So you have different funding sources and you have to put money in those every year. And then you can borrow, right? So then you have short-term borrowing or long-term borrowing. And like Linda used to say, your short-term is like a home equity line. It's something that's quick and short. And the town does that really effectively. And that's where our bond rating is important. We actually want banks to give us money, to loan with us, right? To say, wow, we want to do business with Hadley because they're in such good shape and they can pay it back. And then you have your long-term debt, which is usually outside the levy for bigger projects like buildings or, sometimes equipment. And that adds on to your tax base every year for the life of that loan. And that's like a fixed loan, like on your, if you buy a house. And all those pieces are really important to capital planning. And so as we're moving forward through this process, we have so many requests that you can't fund. You have to figure out what can we fund and why is it important. And just going back to the policies, typically you don't want to, have more than say 10% of your operating going to borrowing. You don't want less than 6%. So there's a window of where it's good to borrow. And the credit raters will look at that. Banks will look at that. You want to have so much free cash available because, again, that's showing that you can manage your budget. And so when Hadley was spending down their free cash, although it was great and it kept everyone, services alive, it was really hard last year when it was the decision was made to not use free cash for operating. And the policy had been in place not to, but there was hard economic times, and so it was. And so now we're trying to correct that. But if, for instance, the town kept doing that and we had, another generator and we, in the middle of the year, there might not be actually any money to fund that. And so either then it's like reduction in services mid-year, or borrowing at an expensive rate. And so free cash is a really good thing to have. There actually will be a great balance of it this year. Not a great balance. There'll be a balance. And people might say, well, why do we need an override if we have free cash? Free cash doesn't mean it's just free to use anywhere. If we're following our policies and our plans, it's going to go into the reserve fund. It's going to go into capital stabilization. It's going to go into OPEB. It's going to go into things that need to be funded every year to show that we know what we're doing. Not just so that the town can operate, but also so the banks and credit raters can say, wow, Hadley, we're going to give you a great rate when you have to go build that new DPW building. And so all of these things work together. And so in terms of our annual process, we just started, staff meets with departments. We go over the request and say, is it capital? Is it not? And we have a bylaw for the capital planning committee that defines what a capital request is. It's meant to be something that's, more than 25,000. It's a big expense. It's not part of operating, and there's a useful life to it. And so, oftentimes requests could be considered operating. How these had really lean budgets. And so what I see right now coming in are requests that to me could be operating, but the way the budgets have been really, whittled down, they become capital requests, $5,000, $3,000. And every community does it differently, right? Some communities can fund things that, all that can be rolled into operating. A police cruiser every year could be considered operating. For some communities, for how that's a capital request because it's so big, it's $100,000 for a cruiser. But we have to then say, how do we fund that if we know we're gonna be doing these things almost every year? And so we build into our budget, there's the budget sheet. The town pays debt every year, every month, a lot of it, long-term and short-term debt. So we take out short-term debt on an annual basis, say May to May, September to September. Next meeting, the bank will be here saying we're going to do another $250,000 for a year for an annual, short-term borrowing. And then there's a longer-term borrowing we have over 20 or 30 years that the town also pays out every year. And then for capital planning, it's okay, well, now we have, $10 million this year. Can we fund it all? Probably not. Maybe we can fund 5 million. What are the pathways to fund those projects? Some of it can be free cash and within the levy. Some of it can be these one-year borrowings, and some of it may need to be these 30-year borrowings, these debt exclusions. And so, that's where the capital planning committee staff, the treasurer, working with our advisors, financial advisors, will come up with a plan. So there's all these different funding sources. So, we have our enterprise funds, sewer and water can help pay for things. I know you don't want to hear we have to increase our rates for things, but our water and sewer rates should be increasing. The request is going to be that they increase again. And the idea is that they fund the assets and the services that we have. And, the rates were stagnant for almost 20 years. And, our financial advisor said, if you can show that your enterprise funds can pay for the services and equipment needed to maintain them, it looks really good when you go out for other borrowing. It doesn't have to cover all the costs, but if the rates stay so low that then the enterprise funds are paying a smaller proportion of these fixes than they should be, then it hurts us when we go out to borrow for other things. And so there's big expenses on the horizon for Hadley. And if a lot of them are with water and sewer, and those are enterprise funds. So it's a fee for service utility that people get billed for it. And the idea is that those rates are meant to fund most of those assets in the maintenance and operations. And there's big ticket items there. Some will be debt exclusion. So the town already authorized $9 million for 2 water tanks. The interesting thing about borrowing, town meeting authorizes it. We go through a capital plan. The town doesn't have to spend it right away until it needs to. And so, Linda's had been doing a great job of balancing what we pay for debt so that it doesn't hit your taxes or it's level every year, right? So as debt rolls off, you can add more debt capacity. So you're spending the same amount every month or every year on debt service and on loans and projects. And so, you can figure out when one project will come off and you can start borrowing for another one. So there's equal debt payment every month, every year for the town. And so although we've had authorization, for instance, for the water tanks, it hasn't started hitting the debt yet. It will soon, but projects don't have to hit, the 9 million doesn't hit the year it is authorized. It's going to be spread out over 20 years. The fire truck has already been incorporated into debt service. So when it arrives, it'll all be paid for, but shortly after it arrived, it doesn't increase your taxes because it was done in a way that your town's already been paying for it for years. And so that's really important part of capital planning is, what are the priorities for the town? You know, is it public safety? Is it statutes by law? So the capital planning committee really looks at all these things with help from staff and says, okay, here's what we can move forward. And then, you know, this year we're going to invite the finance committee to join the capital planning committee to hear from the department. So it's, you know, there's a common understanding of, okay, what are the requests? I think it'll be a great opportunity to, again, to kind of have that by-board meeting, and we only have staff come once, not twice, and everyone can hear the same questions and answers. And then it comes to the select board. And so again, it's, you know, we'll have another by-board meetings, and the schedule is laid out there. You know, in the next 6 months, 5 months of this calendar year, there's a lot of by-board meetings. And the idea is to have everyone understand, you know, what are the requests and how can we fund them and what are the priorities. And so, you know, the town pays a few $100,000, you know, a little over $200,000 every month for debt and capital. And so we have the ability to borrow a fair amount, and we have to manage that. But it's not, you know, I just want to make sure that we understand that, you know, the DPW building is going to be really important to do. I'm not sure when it will move forward. And the idea is that might be a 30-year payment, and that's a lot of money. And if you borrow a lot, it takes away from what other projects can be funded through borrowing or free cash or other things. And so it's like, you know, it's just balancing your checkbook. If you have a big expense coming up, you know, you're gonna have to pay it every month, every year for the next 20 years. It means you might be able to pay for less. And so, you know, right now we're trying to figure out, well, with all the requests coming in, what can we pay for within the levy? What might be more? What needs to be borrowed? You know, right now, I'll say for 27, there aren't a lot of big requests. The reason we do 5 or 10 year outlook is to understand what's coming the next year or two. And so I will say in the next few years, you know, there's maybe another fire truck. There's more water and sewer fixes. There's the DPW building. And so, you know, there's all those can be millions of dollars. And so maybe this year we go light, right? We know what we can do, knowing that in the next few years, we're going to have more debt that's going to come on, right? Or what I've noticed is a lot of departments are starting to ask for computers and equipment, which can be bundled. And so part of this process is to say, you know, can we bundle these requests, and then can we go out and buy them in bulk to save, as opposed to 6 computers here, 5 computers here? Can we do a bulk purchase and save money across departments? You know, we do have a maintenance fund for buildings. And so, you know, determining how is that funding allocated to different departments to fund, you know, things like painting, carpet, or smaller repairs, that to me is not really necessarily capital. Can it be funded out of a maintenance line somewhere else? And really save capital for the things that are, you know, the bigger items. You know, we might need a new sanding truck. We might need, you know, something that comes, you know, we're not aware of. And so, you know, every year the idea is to put money into different funds, pay for capital requests, and then also put money aside into reserve funds, capitalization funds to pay for things later. The idea is those can then be used, you know, incrementally when we actually have a big debt service item. And so, you know, I just, you know, kind of want to give that big picture. I don't have an example, but, you know, we have had 5 or 6 departments make requests. I haven't totaled them up. It's probably going to be, you know, $7 million this year of capital requests. We can't fund all that. And some of those are going to come out of different enterprise funds or different things. The question is, okay, what's a priority? Then moving for next year, there's going to be a similar number of requests, you know, every year after. So the idea is have good policies in place and a good structure, a good process, a good way to rate these requests, and then bring them to fall town meeting. And so, you know, working with Dee Dee, and we're still going to have Linda here to help, you know, what is the way to fund all these things? And a lot of them is funded through debt, which I didn't really want to get into too much. There's a lot to it. But we do have some free cash. We do have other funds that can be used, but we don't want to drain all the funds to pay for one thing. And that's where we'll set up a payment schedule over 5, 10, 20 years. And so we don't want to, you know, drain our reserve funds to pay for something in year one. We're going to set it up to pay it over time so we can carry debt. I just think that's really important. I think having the policies in place are really important. And so, you know, things come up, right? So there was COVID, there was the pandemic, prices are skyrocketing right now. So it might mean, you know, again, what can we fund? You know, are we just going to have to do less? Can we make equipment last a year longer? So, you know, we have a useful life here for equipment, and a lot of things are 20 years. You know, given the conditions in the winter, the salt on the roads, can a truck really last 20 years? Maybe. But, you know, that's the goal, to try to get there, right? Not to have, you know, a request every so often. Could it get another year out of something? And those are going to be some of the questions asked this year of departments is, you know, can we make it another year with some of the equipment we have? we don't want to turn it off, and push it off completely, but we want to make sure we're balancing, this year's request with future requests. And so, I can take questions, comments. Like I said, I might not have all the answers, but I'd love to hear, if there's any concerns, and we can get back to you. I just want to kind of give that big picture of what's happening. And really all these requests are coming in. The Capital Planning Committee and Finance Committee will be meeting in September. We have fall town meeting October 22nd. So, all this concludes then. Really the work then begins for staff to figure out how to fund it all. So town meeting gives authorizations. It's then staff's, responsibility to figure out what's the best way to fund it. And so, sometimes we call out different articles as it might mean a certain piece, right? So I will say there's going to be a request to fund the bridge on 47 in Northern Hadley. We're applying for grants for that. So to me, that will be a separate article depending on grant funding. The money won't be spent unless we get the grants. But, what we've heard is we need a local match to be competitive to get this funding. So, $100,000 or $200,000 in local funds can leverage $2 million in grant funds to get the culvert, which will now be a bridge, replaced. To me, that's worth it. And the money, the article will say all these things, and it will be $200,000. And if it's approved, it doesn't mean that we're going to spend $200,000. It's going to stay there until we get the grants, until the project starts. And we might not actually start hitting our debt or anything until, a few years from now. And so although it's been approved, it's not factored into, what's available, next year or the year after. It's year 3. We're going to start maybe spending it. And that's when it hits the books and we say, okay, now where we have to, say we spend it over a few years, we have that much less to pay for capital requests coming in FY30. Even though it was approved in FY27, it's not going to start until FY30. And so that's the job of staff to figure out, how do all the pieces fit together? And so right now, Hadley has debt, from many years ago to just recently on the books that we pay off long term. And it's a separate category in the budget every year. You can see it of what's long-term debt, what's paid, principal and interest, short-term debt, principal and interest. And it's a big number every year. The idea is to maintain that every year, going forward.
I've just got a couple. So when I think about things that we've talked about in the past, we're kind of reflecting on where we can improve on things. One, I think a process that we were talking about because it came up over the course of the past year, where there was, a circumstance where something was, kind of an emergency situation. We needed to resolve the emergency as quickly as possible, but it really kind of bigger than a bread box, and it deserved kind of a lot of attention to make sure like all of the possibilities were fleshed out before we made a decision to go down a certain path. And that raised a question about, whether or not it made sense to have, a smaller group of people that could come together quickly, make sure all of the information is there before, the select board makes an authorization. Is that something that you're thinking about kind of in terms of process? Because it's part of the capital planning process, but sometimes it needs to, it wasn't even on the capital plan,
right?
And something just blew. So, just kind of thinking through to make sure that we have a process in place so that we don't have multiple people second guessing the decision after the fact, when the train left the station, which is what happened in that situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good example. I mean, some of it is also, like I said, we have this, building maintenance, budget fund, right, or account. And, I'm not sure how that is, used or how it's prioritized. And, so we have different departments who will spend from it. Some of it is like, is there a better way to prioritize that or process there? In terms of our capital planning for the town, like I said, there's a bylaw, but I'm seeing there's a lot of smaller requests coming in. And so, either we roll that into operating, we realize department budgets will be more every year and they won't be part of capital, or is it capital? I mean, when you have a $2,000 request as capital, every other year, to me, that's really operating. But, we've I think in the past, the town's budgets are, so strict and so lean that, everyone's like, oh, well, why does that department need $2,000 extra for supplies or maintenance? But really it's like, the senior center has high traffic areas and they'll need to fix it every year. So the town's consolidated into this building maintenance account, which is fine. I'm just not sure, kind of how that's used and how that's prioritized. So to me, it's like, again, having a better process for that. I think the emergency request is a great example of, okay, what does that do? How do we have is there a subcommittee or representatives from finance and select board that can meet with staff and review those, determine alternatives if they were assessed, and then bring a request forward to be used? Yeah.
And then the second thing is, sometimes there are things that don't find their way onto the capital planning. Maybe because people think, nobody's going to let me do that or want me to do that. And I think having more discipline around like an ROI lens, when we're looking at these capital requests, because, I think back over the years and how many times a decision was made, or I don't know if it was a decision, it was just like, yeah, there's software that could do that. There's software that can automate that. But that's a capital item. It's going to cost us $38,000 to buy the software. But had we done it at a point in time, it would have paid for itself in about 20 months or something like that. So I hope that we're also taking that into account in the capital planning processes as well, especially now, post override and knowing that we need to really, really be careful on our staffing, but our staff needs help.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the video links I sent from, again, from, DLS was about, there's a few, but one was, okay, what are the parameters to review capital requests? And so, we have in the bylaw a few things, but other communities will say, right, what's the return on investment? Is it required by law? Is it public safety? And so they actually set out more parameters every year to review those. And sometimes they might say, well, for these next 2 years, it's going to be sidewalks and infrastructure. And other departments, won't get some of their requests. And so right now there aren't those parameters in place and some of those guidelines. And so we have some, but it could be improved or could be, we could add to it. Some of the request forms communities use are really detailed, age, expected life, where are you, annual maintenance costs. And so those are things I think that happen informally, when we meet with departments, but it's not, put out there anywhere. So, and some of the ideas are like, okay, to start your capital plan, have an inventory of all your assets and infrastructure, everything. And we have various pieces of that, but not anything to me that's like, a spreadsheet I could just go look at and say, okay, here's, maybe there is, right? Here's all the trucks we own. Here's all the roads we own. Here are all the buildings we own. Here's what the costs are, whether it's insurance, operations, maintenance. And so to me, those are things we can improve on. And so, when a truck comes up for renewal or a new cruiser is needed, okay, what's the, how many are there? How many are in use at a time? How much does it cost? And a cruiser will be coming up. It's something that they do need to replace. But for instance, okay, well, we have surplus vehicles as well. What does that mean? What's the cost to carry those, to maintain them? And I think all those are really important. I think, again, also some of it's the policies. I think the policies are actually in place. Some of it's then following it, right? So reminding departments and committees and boards, here are the policies, right? Here's where we are in our free cash. Here's where we are in our debt to income limits, right? So if you're going to go buy a home, right, the banks look at what your debt to income is. Communities have a very similar process. And so, if we're over or under, it doesn't look good. So there's that spot where it's like, okay, we're in a good position with our debt. And it had been done. I haven't, with Linda leaving, I've been looking through files. I'm sure it's there, but again, it's like, can we just have I'd like to have a simple page or two that distills all that and has it, a few bullet points, like here's what we need every time. So everyone can know, okay, here's where we are with our debt to income or debt to operating. Here's our long-term. Here's what we borrow almost on average every year. Here's what we can afford every year, and just general guidelines. And then also what are those parameters to make decisions when it comes time to capital planning?
So prior to COVID, I think it was, we had a rotation set up where a specific department would be, I guess, next up for capital items or priority preference given to that department.
Right.
And so we could focus on driving into exactly what they needed, what it was going to cost, what we could afford. And then we had a rotation set up, so it would change every year. And the idea was, okay, you know, I think at the time it was DPW or fire or something like that was, all right, it was a big ticket department. That was going to be first. And then we could intersperse it with like the senior center the next year, kind of give ourselves a little bit of a break in between. And I know when COVID happened, that all got abandoned because we were more worried about keeping our heads above water as a town, but maybe something to look at for the future.
Yeah.
And that was in part to get away from okay, we're just gonna tell everybody to cut your budget 5% across the board.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because sometimes somebody could easily cut 5% and other departments had nowhere to go.
Right.
So that was part of the rationale behind it.
So we've been working on trying to get money in the reserve fund for capital for some time now. That's been always one of the things I've always tried to do. We even tried to have that pass as an override, but that didn't go so well. Anyways, I really think that we should focus on a big chunk on a regular basis, putting from our free cash into the reserve. If we can build up that reserve and then have it on an annual basis from our free cash going into that reserve, then we could even borrow against that down the road when the bigger ticket items come up. I'd also like to see that when we put in on a regular basis, maybe we say this amount, maybe 2/3 is for capital and 1/3 is for building maintenance, because we've been trying to do the building maintenance for some time now, such as the town hall. We have not been able to save, and we do have a building maintenance account, but that goes back to free cash at the end of the year. It is not saved year after year. So we have no bucket to pull from. So we need to start building those buckets back up. And that is not something that we would want to take from on a regular one of these capital items, right, on an annual basis, but it's something we need to build. We need to build a reserve.
Would that be something like a building maintenance stabilization fund? Like if you know you're gonna have to replace AC units or HVAC systems and stuff like that, that way it doesn't go away at the end of every year.
So a reserve fund versus how we've been using free cash. The reserve fund rolls over, but are there any different stipulations on what you can use it for?
In a reserve fund, you would vote it for a specific purpose. So whether it's for, typically you can have a broad purpose, but it can only be used for that purpose then. So, free cash. I mean, so the thing about free cash is, it's like, we'll say it's like the leftover money. If, we get more revenue in or other things, it's really volatile. You always want to have some free cash on hand for those unexpected expenses. And the idea is that it doesn't fund operating, it can fund capital. The idea is ideally, right, you'd have a few ways to fund unexpected expenses. What Amy's talking about is having kind of, it's like putting that money aside for that future car payment, knowing you're going to have it. If we have free cash every year, can we set it aside in a reserve fund or, some other kind of fund, knowing that then we can draw on it over time. Free cash, you can decide how to spend it every time, but it's not reliable. So, we might have a lot of free cash this year. Next year might be half of what we have this year. And so if you're expecting that to be an annual thing, it can be, with local receipts, whatever, all these things change. And so it's really hard to know. That goes back to having policy. So if there's a policy in place or a structure saying, okay, if there's free cash, we're going to put 20% into.
We don't have a policy in place, I don't believe, because we've never been able to do it because
Right.
we've been using the free cash.
Yeah, free cash, right. And that's where you'd have a policy to say, if there is so much free cash, a certain percentage can go into these funds. And then the goal is to work there toward every. Yes.
To make sure that with the reserve fund that we didn't like back ourselves into only being able to have it be for certain things. But if you do it as like a general use and then vote on the items that come out, and it should be fine. Right?
Well, we would put it in for a particular reason. So it wouldn't be for general use. We would put it in for capital or for building maintenance. So those are the two reasons why we would want to put away for something.
Right, but then when that comes onto the town, would it still?
Floor. So if you
Yeah.
come out of capital, it would be like for against the DPW, the Capitol
Okay.
building.
So I was just trying to think of the logistics.
It doesn't have to be for a particular department.
Right.
It's for the town. Yeah.
I think both Nate and you too, Amy, are kind of alluding to capital stabilization funds,
Mhm.
which are specifically earmarked for a purpose, such as what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then have a regular funding plan that
Right.
go in there, and then when the time comes, you use it.
Yeah, and I think you can use different sources for the same thing. So, if there's a big purchase, you can, if you have that fund, you can say, okay, 10% for the first 5 years will be paid off this way. And then you're going to have another, you can layer your debt or your funding sources for something. And the town's been doing really good at that, actually. And so it's not, I'm not up here saying something that hasn't been happening. It's, credit to, Linda and other people who have been here the last 10 years. It was really in the late 2010s, they started, coming up with a new approach to debt service to keep the level payment. And so, as your debt rolls off, you have this, cone of where you can increase your debt to keep that level payment. And the town's been doing that for about 10 years almost. And that's a really great way to approach it, as opposed to having these dips and spikes. And so, the worst case there is you have, some years where debt rolls off, and then you put it into operating, right? Or you spend all your free cash. And then 2 years down the road, oh no, you need a new sanding truck, and you have no reserves, no funding, and no savings account, no free cash. And so that's why the plan, the 10-year outlook and the program is really important. So you have these ideas of like, okay, what is coming up? What I'm seeing is that this year there's not a lot of big requests, but in the next 2 to 3 years there are, right? There's going to be the new, maybe some well work happening. There's, expensive vehicles. There's the public works building, if that moves forward. The schools are aging, so they need, I'll say maintenance, but it's more than just maintenance. It's multi-million-dollar work on the buildings. And so, all that can be funded. It's just going to be, how do you stagger it? And, how do you make it work? Some things might have to be pushed off. Ideally, we'd have free cash every year and we put it in different accounts. We've met our OPEB obligations, but it's been pushed out. They were here a bit ago. The idea is to put a little bit in this year, the next few years, knowing that, in 5-7 years from now, there's going to be a bigger request coming from the town. So again, how do you plan for year 7 now?
So what we started doing a little bit was such as the water, sewer.
Yeah.
When those departments needed something, we borrowed, but we took the payments out of water, sewer.
Right.
We did that for the first time with CPA money. We needed the money for the Hopkins Fields.
Right.
We borrowed against the CPA money.
Right.
These are great things. Maybe with the school, they're going to need some big expenses, possibly borrowing against the school for choice money. Okay, so that's where the payment would come from. So if we so that's why I'm saying we need to build up some other funds, because those are working well. CPA worked very, very well.
Right.
The school could work well. And then if we start building up other places that we could, for that particular purpose.
Right.
So that's why the reserved fund is important.
Yeah. And one thing that's somewhat overlooked is that the money that sits in these funds earns interest.
Yeah.
And a town can actually earn a lot of interest. And so if you have all these accounts and you have, a few $1 million in there, that's, interest rates are great right now. And so you actually want money in these funds right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not, but this right now, it's a really great time to have money set aside in certain funds, given the interest rates. I will say I did apply on behalf of the town for 2 CPA projects. So I think the town could use CPA more. It has to be eligible for CPA, right? Whether it's housing, open space, historic preservation, but CPA is one of the funding sources that the state mentions to help fund capital. I find it a little funny because, you can't go buy like a dump truck. But in those categories that's eligible for CPA, it is something towns do often, actually. And we will go out for more grants. So, Public Works has applied for a number of grants. I know other departments have. And so to me, that's, we can't rely on that. That's just bonus. And so the CPA requests, we're also applying for grants for those same projects. And the idea is that the CPA will make the town more competitive. And then we actually probably won't spend the amount of CPA money requested, because we'll get grants to, offset those costs. But, again, it's combining those resources. How can you use local dollars to get other funding, or, in terms of debt, better bond ratings, right? So we actually want banks to want to lend to the town. And we're in a really good position right now. I think moving forward, we want to continue to be in that good position. So, you know, I will say there will be, like, I think the free cash thing is important to mention. It's kind of like, you know, when people say, oh, I've heard it's a split tax rate, we can raise more money because we have a split tax rate. No, we're capped as how much money we can raise. I think when people hear free cash, like, oh my gosh, the town somehow we didn't need to have the override, or we didn't need to, how do we get all this money? And it's really, it's not like it's a lot of money that, and the town has a budget of 23 million. If we have $500,000 in free cash, that's not to me a lot of free cash. If it's $1 million, that's great. The idea is it's a percentage of your budget every year. The idea is we'd be generating that every year, and we'd be saving some to help pay for unexpected expenses. Usually we'd use those to help with grant reimbursements till the money comes in. And then you put them in these funds. You put them in reserve funds, capital stabilization, whatever it may be, you know, retirement, employee compensation, all those pieces need to be funded. And so, you know, it doesn't come from anywhere else, all those pieces. It comes from your general fund, and then whatever really is left over at the year is free cash. And, you know, hopefully the idea is you can, you know, balance your books, have new growth, and have more money coming in every year. But, you know, I think the new growth piece is really important. And so that's part of the capital. How do you fund all these things? So, you know, Hadley's been doing really well with that. I think in the future, it comes down to, you know, land use decisions, the businesses and commercial zoning. You know, how can Hadley maintain new growth to fund these things? They can't do it. You know, if we stay level and everything else is increasing, then the ability to do capital planning is reduced every year. And so new growth is really important part of capital planning in the budget. And so, you know, if building permits are, you know, not as coming in as fast, you know, people aren't building as much, you know, how does a town get new growth to keep maintaining itself? I think it's a really important piece of it. It's, you know, it's tangential to capital planning, but it's really, you know, that's what funds it, is the new growth is also really important. And so, you know, I know people like Hadley as a small rural town. I think most of Hadley can stay the way it is and still have new growth. I think Route 9 is a really interesting place to look for it. There are other parts of Hadley to say, can there be new growth? And people might say, well, I don't, you know, the planning board is looking at an overlay over Route 9. To me, it's an opportunity for things. And yes, it will change the community, but in a very small area. And the idea is that if new development could bring in $1 million in tax revenue, that fund services the town. It funds a lot of things we like, buildings, roads. And so, you know, we're not talking anything more than 3 or 4 stories of what's being proposed in some areas. And it's really actually a really small part of the town. But, you know, if we don't have new growth, we don't have a plan in place, it's going to be really hard to keep managing, you know, what's happening. And so Hadley's done a great job. You know, you've made it through the override, you've made it through COVID and the pandemic. You've had plans in place, you know, for 20 years, the town's been doing a really good job of managing its budget. I think the next 10 years is going to be really different for a lot of communities, given the expenses, the cost of things, and revenue generation.
Anyone have additional questions, comments? Is there anyone online that has any questions for either Nate or Dee in regards to capital planning? Or any of the funds?
No one's indicating any issues.
Right. Okay. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think the next one is the budget calendar. I just wanted to go over it. You know, every year it starts July 1 with the fiscal year and it runs through May and June. And so, you know, I put out a select board schedule. What are the big topics every meeting? And kind of rolled into that is also the budget calendar. And so we have capital planning happening right now. The CPA is happening. You know, the idea is to get a draft warrant soon for fall town meeting. And then, you know, all of a sudden it's October, we have town meeting, we have the tax rate hearing, you know, and we're starting the budget season. So while all this is happening, this is really for this current fiscal year. In the background, we're also planning for FY28. And so, you know, what can we, you know, especially once free cash is certified, we have our tax rate and our valuations, the town kind of understands where can we go with the next FY28 budget. So we're in FY27 right now, which started July 1. FY28 will start next July 1. The planning for it starts this fall. And so, you know, the calendar that's in there that we put in the budget every year just outlines that. I think it's really important to understand that. And so, by December, we're already looking at preliminary budgets for the next fiscal year. And then there's meetings in January and February. And the idea is to get it ready for spring town meeting, for annual town meeting. And, with the two boards here, I think some of it would be, I think having a schedule is really important, and understanding how can we have by-board meetings that are productive. How are we all asking the same questions when it comes time for budgeting? And so it was just to put that out there, here's the process, I laid it out through this calendar year in terms of meetings. I can go and try to do it for the next 6 months into 27 and say, here's, all the select board meetings for the next fiscal year and by-board meetings with the finance committee. And we can try to start outlining, okay, when are we going to hit certain topics? So, when will these discussions with budget come up, say in December, or January? When does it happen in February? And the idea is that this, schedule is a dynamic document. So, I met with Pam, I met with Amy, I've made updates to it. And so every select board meeting or every other, the monthly schedule, my idea is to update it and show what are the new things coming on, what are the topics that we need to be discussed between different boards and committees. And so, that's the only reason I have it there. I don't have anything special happening. It's just, there is always these cycles happening. And so Sue said, there's a tax cycle, there's a budget cycle, there's all these different cycles. And so although we're in capital planning right now, we're also getting prepared to do the next fiscal year budget. And that's all that is for.
Nate, to that point, could we, it doesn't necessarily have to go on the calendar, but just, so there's some external contracts that generate revenue for us. If we could try to have those be, negotiated, resolved, and known earlier in the budget cycle would be better. I mean, specifically, I'm thinking about the university is one. And then also Action Ambulance, I think, is going to be coming up for contracts. So, rather than go to the end of the fiscal year and have that be an unknown, would be really good to avoid.
Yeah.
And then I just had a question about free cash. At one point, we had a calendar for free cash as well. Like, when the accountant would be done, whoever had pieces of it. And I don't know if we're still following that, but right now, like, do we have a sense when we'll have a free cash number? Will it be September?
It should be. I mean, so, I will say we're in our second year with the auditors. They've asked for a lot. So, every year we have, usually 2 audits. One's just the general annual audit, and then we have a single year audit based on federal funds that come in. And so the auditors have been asking a lot of questions. So our accountant and our staff have been really busy. We still haven't finished the audit. All the paperwork's in time. So, everything by fiscal year has to follow state guidelines and timelines. So we're there. We're getting close to an estimate on free cash. We should have it by next month. But yeah, I will say our accountant and staff have been really busy just doing the audit. Unfortunately, it's, and the next one will start next month too. So.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your budget calendar,
Yeah.
and I can remember for October, November of last year, when it came to I believe it was the assessors.
Yeah.
The day that the assessors were here, they expected the select board
Right.
to make a decision right then and there to saying, okay, are you going to pass this?
Right.
So I'm hoping that they're going to be talking, whether it's a private session or whatever it is, instead of putting the select board on the spot, because
Yeah.
2 were on Zoom, 1 wasn't there, and they were just, for them, quick on the gun to making the decision. So hopefully something like that doesn't happen again, that there could be a little bit better communication, at least a week or 2 before.
No, thanks. Yeah.
Because that from what I saw being on this side of the fence going, okay, this, that's a lot of stress to put on the select board to say, okay, here you go, either it's happening or it's not. So at least they're helping out,
Right.
maybe a little bit of discussion before.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why, I agreed. I think, that's why I try to put out the schedule for the select board, included the finance committee. I think having these meetings can be really helpful, especially having the same communication. Yeah, the tax hearing night is really important. There's a deadline to get that in for the state so that everything can happen. So I agree with you. The conversations have to happen ahead of time to know, what are the questions being asked? Where is everyone thinking? What's everyone thinking? Because it's really hard to make a decision in one evening. But then usually we need it by, late November, I mean, December 1st is the ultimate deadline to do that. Typically, you'd want it earlier to get all the, everything happening and flowing right with, information going to the state. And so and then you have to have your free cash certified in September. So there's really only, a 2-month window where, the valuations are coming in, we know our budget and the deadline to get it going for next year. So there is that small window for the assessor and everyone to talk. I agree that it's important to have those conversations. So it's not, I think this year there'll be, there might be a lot of questions. We already heard it tonight. And so part of the reason having Susan here to talk about taxes is to, again, if there's questions after the fact, please email me. I won't know the answers necessarily. I'll figure out who does. But even for the community, if you have questions, send them in. I'd rather get ahead of it and not come down to one night and then have everyone try to make a decision. I'd rather have all the questions be asked in the next, month, spend a month researching it, and then come back to the assessors and the select board and you and say, okay, here's what we've heard. We heard a lot of questions about, are commercial valuations accurate? Are we doing our assessments accurately? All these questions I want to be able to answer and say, sure, we are. I think we are, right? What Molly was saying is the state came out earlier this summer and said the equalized values for the towns, here they are. And so the idea is the town needs to be within 90% and 110% of the value when they're doing their assessments. And the closer you are to 100 to 1 to 1, that's great. And so in Hadley, we're actually getting better with our commercial, getting closer to 1 to 1. Right, than we have been in years past. So this year, I think it was like 95 or something, which is really great. The question might be though, is are we, even though the assessments are accurate to what the value, to what we think the value is, are we undervaluing those properties? And, the idea is that what, you asked about, well, how are they valued if it's not, sales approach, it's income approach.
Is it great for who? Is it great for the taxpayer that their assessment values are going up and paying more in taxes?
Right,
Or is it
right.
great for the commercial properties that they're actually paying assessed with really what they're valued at?
Right.
What's great?
Right.
Great for whom?
But I will say that the commercial goes through a pretty rigorous process and then the state approves them. So they review all commercial assessments every year. And so if people are like, oh, I think we're undervaluing, these stores, every year the assessor, and you've heard, if you've seen the form, it's a really long form. All those establishments submit them, it's reviewed, and then the state reviews them too and probably, runs probably analytics on them and confirms that especially for commercial, the assessments are correct. And so, people might say, well, are our assessments correct? Yes. Are we valuing them correctly? Yes, we're at almost 1 to 1 value. And so, then the question becomes, well, is the split tax rate, is that beneficial for the town? I don't think it is for a number of reasons. But that's to me a discussion and research that needs to happen before the tax rate hearing, right? And so everyone has these opinions about, is it good for the town? I think it isn't for a number of reasons. Businesses pay a lot in their taxes. They pay excise taxes, meals, lodging, everything. They contribute significantly to the town. And the fact that they're almost 50% of our valuation is more than most communities across the state. Most communities might have like 10%, right? To be at almost 50% with commercial is pretty amazing. And so to have a tax rate thinking that they'll pay more when they're already paying those taxes, other taxes, excise taxes, and bringing businesses, people into town, there's a lot of wins there. There could be some drawbacks. And so the question is, what I love to, after tonight, again, questions, let me know, how do we address these questions or concerns or comments? Who are they? Who is it good for? Right? Can we drill down? What does it mean?
What's good for the town? Because you're raising taxes.
Well, so then, yeah, but
Good for the town.
yeah, but taxes are necessary, right?
No, you're right. But,
I think if you raise taxes, people are gonna leave.
right.
Right. Right. I mean, it's the balance of what Amy, you asked, right? So either your assessments are high and your taxes are low, or vice versa. It's a balancing act. And so, split taxes, those changes it a little bit. But yeah, no, like I said, if there's more questions, please send them to me. I'd like to get ahead of these things and say, okay, right, instead of one evening, can we answer them over a few meetings? Can we?
Well, I was gonna say that we can kind of have the tax discussion, potentially on a few different meetings just for additional questions and discussion. But my expectation is that we will have the hearing and then at the next meeting, have our last and final thoughts and discussion and then do a vote. So have it that way.
So we have an opportunity,
So, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So which means we have to schedule the hearing, maybe a meeting earlier than in the past, knowing we have to then get it to, the assessor and everyone, collector, to then go to the state. So, if typically we'd have our hearing, say if the select board have a hearing in, late October or November, we should have the hearing, it'll probably be the first meeting in November, it really is when we should have it then, or a separate meeting, knowing that you don't have a follow-up meeting to make the decision. So you can have your hearing and then you can have your discussion after the hearing. And so it sounds like, we'd have to maybe throw another meeting in there. Knowing the schedule, Senator Comerford wants to come out on November 4th and talk to the select board. A lot of things are happening. And so, to throw it in, I think that's what happened last year. You had it in on November 2nd or 3rd or whatever date it was. And it was a big meeting. Maybe it has to be an additional meeting that week because it's just a lot to have in one evening to have.
Can we do it early?
Typically, you'd have it after your town meeting because you need to have everything set there. So you have, it becomes it gets really busy October, November, September, October, November for finance and for select board. So, I would say October 22nd town meeting, you have
Meeting that long, 28.
Yeah, we want to be able to invite the assessors as early as possible so they can actually show up. Yeah.
Just invite them again.
I know, they were invited, but
28.
yeah.
I could add an extra meeting that night. On
Yeah.
October 28th.
Which will be good too, because we can also discuss, any town meeting follow-ups from 22nd.
Mhm.
I know you hate more meetings, David, I'm sorry.
I love meetings.
and plans and studies and
20, so that would be a by board.
Yeah, I would think so.
October 20.
I mean, it's not Halloween, it's close, but
I'll dress up.
Do we get to vote on your outfit?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone? Else?
any other questions? And, please, you can always come into town hall again and ask questions if you don't want to do it here, but, town hall is always open. This was, this was a big overview. There are probably specific questions people might have, and the capital planning process is underway. So that'll happen in the next month.
I just want to say I appreciate the planning that went into it ahead of time, but it's also great to have us all hearing it and so that we can plan our calendars and everything. So
Great.
thank you for that.
Are you guys gonna adjourn your meeting, or are you gonna continue your meeting in the other room, or are you guys done?
Done. We're done, I think. We're done. Do I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Paul, seconded by Peter to close our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
No.
So we're gonna
Would you want
move
to-
down to, so that's my one announcement.
Yes.
Are there any announcements?
I have, come to the movies.
Oh, yeah, that's what time last night.
8:00.
Half an hour, hurry up, guys.
I was gonna say you.
Jumanji.
Just send me an
Have it
email.
on here, on the lawn.
Like, send a picture of the phone, like, there's a lot of meetings.
The original.
So just email me tomorrow your availability. So like a few times. Whatever works best for you. Let me know.
So you have
Okay, thanks. Yeah, everything's
last one in the three-part series, that the Park and Rec. So with East Hampton Savings.
True North.
True North, yeah, East Hampton Savings Bank.
Also, we are accepting applications for Citizens Academy. We have 7 people already signed up, so we have room for about 10 more. Looking to start on September 24th.
Number 24, Citizens Academy.
Citizens Academy.
Are you doing Thursdays again?
Yes, Thursdays really work the best. That's when most, there's no boards or committees meet on Thursday night, so it's a really nice empty night to slide into there.
Water and sewer rates, I think, are due September 1st.
Correct?
A lot going on, really busy.
Citizens.
I was going to, but you want me to do that now?
Well, they
Oh.
thought maybe moving announcements up to the beginning of the meeting instead of the.
Okay, okay, so my apologies. So on behalf of the select board, I wanted to offer condolences to the families of Joan Kapinski, as well as Dick Grader, who just passed recently. And I don't think there's anybody who didn't know Mr. Grader, an incredible amount of service that he provided to the town over many, many decades in a variety of roles. So we're certainly going to miss him.
Moving on to appointments. So we're asking the board to appoint Michael Adams as the new DPW laborer and driver effective August 31st of this year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Jason. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then we have a couple resignations this evening. So we have Kimberly Piper is resigning from the town as the assistant collector effective Friday, August 21st. Kim leaves the town after 20+ years of experience and will be very missed by us and her coworkers. Adam Warner is resigning from the town as the DPW mechanic, and that's going to be effective on Friday, August 28th.
Make a motion to accept both resignations.
Second.
Motion by Jason, seconded by David. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And then under other personnel items, so I did just want to say that if you are out there watching this, you'll notice that our agenda is set up a little bit differently. We wanted to have announcements, more towards the top when there's more people present, and if there's anyone here for them, that they're able to get that out before the very end. And then we're just kind of some of the sections have additional sections, and we have additional subsections, just to be able to delineate what we're going to be talking about, and then offering a little bit more transparency and explanations to that to help the public and to better kind of organize what we have. So without further ado, 5.3 other personnel items. So we do have quite a few vacancies right now. We're currently looking for a building commissioner, a council on aging outreach coordinator, a board of health nurse, a DPW wastewater mechanic operator, council on aging van driver, and a town administrative assistant. So a TAA.
That's right.
We got a TA, we have a ATA, and we're looking for a TAA.
I was trying to figure it out. That's where I landed. I will say we do have one other vacancy. However, there is an offer out right now. We're waiting to hear back. Hopefully we'll have another appointment for y'all very soon for the land use coordinator position.
I was gonna ask about that, 'cause I didn't see that on here.
It's not,
Okay.
I went ahead and maybe I've overshot and pulled it off too soon, but I'm very hopeful.
I thought there was somebody in line for the board of health nurse or somebody who's interested.
There was, and she withdrew her name. We had tentatively made an offer to her, and she literally pulled out
Okay.
right after and made us quite sad. She had come over and seen the COA, met with them.
Yeah.
We were all really excited, and somebody else just sort of swooped in with more money.
Yeah.
And so Ben, I just returned from vacation. Ben is on vacation. As soon as he comes back, we're going to get back out there and find the perfect person for the Board of Health and for the COA.
Yeah, and I just want to say quickly, there are some vacancies in there, as we just noted, there's some people leaving the town. And, I think it can be a stressful time, and I want to acknowledge that it is for staff, they pick up extra work. But I also think it's a great time to look at job descriptions, to plan and say, okay, what can we do, moving forward? And so, I've been asked like, are you concerned? You don't seem like you're really, worried. And that's not true. It's just, I'm not really demonstrative in my emotions. But, you know, to me, it's something I'm going to think about, right? Like if, I talked to Scott, I talked to department heads. And so, I don't think it does any good if I'm projecting being worried. And honestly, I'm not, right? I think we have a plan in place. Jennifer, she just got back, we talk, like I said, I talked to department heads. And so, we'll figure this out. I think this is actually a great opportunity to talk about, okay, what is this, the staffing structure in our departments? And so, I've asked all the departments for, what would they really want to see in an ideal situation in terms of like FTEs and positions. And so, although there are vacancies, the jobs still get done, nothing's, there's no worry, yet. Right. And so I just want to put that out there that, there's, that although there are vacancies, it's not, I'm aware and, you're aware and, we're getting plans in place. And so, just because I may not seem too worried, it doesn't mean I'm not, concerned and thinking about this.
You need to get more in touch with your emotional side.
It's the way I was raised. I can't.
It is.
Poker face, but the internal screen. All communicating professionalism, so that's good.
But Nate, to your point, it's an opportunity also to look at the how. Like how we're doing things, right? Service delivery plan. So, again, bringing up, David's brought it up before, is there an opportunity for automation of more repetitive tasks, things like that through the adoption of software? The pay scale of people performing some of those functions. Does it make sense to have a higher paid person doing something that, somebody at a perhaps lower rate of pay might be doing that, all of that. So I agree with you. I think it's an opportunity.
For every position that we've put out, we have reviewed the job descriptions as we've been moving forward with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I think that we're going to continue to do. It's just a good practice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving on to 6.1, we have Jim Maximowski here who's the chair of the bylaw committee. And then he's looking to give us a quick update and then requesting new members to fill the. So Jim, are you here?
Yeah. I disappeared.
You're muted.
Nope, he's not.
He's not muted. We just can't hear you.
There we go.
Is the volume in here? I was gonna say.
Just a minute.
The first person talking.
I'll mute my audio.
Can you try again?
I'm trying to get myself shown here.
No, we got you. We can hear you. It was on our end.
Okay. Anyways, the bylaw committee was formed approximately 4 or 5 years ago by Carolyn Brennan with the charge of updating, revising, or adding to the town bylaws as the committee would see fit or as requests come in. And there are 10 people assigned to this bylaw committee. And over the last maybe the last year and a half, 5 of them, or 4 of them, depending on how you want to count one of them, have resigned or moved on to another job or retired. That leaves us with approximately 6 people. We need a quorum to hold a meeting, and we have not held a meeting for the last 5 months. Meet once a month on the 3rd Tuesday of the month because we don't have the right members. So I'm here tonight to request the select board to either cut the committee down accordingly or to replace committee members. For example, Mike Spankenable was representing the fire chief. He is retired. And not on the committee anymore. Paul Benjamin has resigned from the bylaw committee, and although the finance committee has replaced him with somebody, I'm not sure the select board has voted that person in. Tom Quinn has resigned as a member. Kayla Labriel has resigned and from the town. So therefore, we still have a 10-member official committee, But unless we basically get every person at a meeting, we can't have a meeting. And so that's what I'm here tonight is to either, Mike Spankenable has signified he would like to stay on the committee, but I'm not sure that Bob Flaherty would want him representing the fire department or not. That's out of my area of responsibility. So I'm making some request here to do something from the Board of Selectmen.
Are you looking at just reducing the total number of members? Which I think 10 seems like a lot.
Bylaws are a heavy lift. It might be that more is better. Because this is a committee that you really need people doing the work on. But perhaps a lower number would be okay.
I was thinking 7.
Yeah. So.
Dropping it down to 7.
Can I ask you a different question to get to the number? Jim, one of the things that struck me when the committee was initially formed was that you had a lot of department heads and I believe they were on the committee as like subject matter experts. But when you think about the bylaws, some of them are fire related, many of them are fire related, but not all of them are fire related. Same with the building commissioner or, different individuals. And I'm wondering if it would make more sense to have a smaller core group of people doing the reviewing and head scratching and saying, why do we need this? Or, people have asked us to look at this. And then pull in like the experts that you need. It's like, okay, we're going to look at all of the fire related things. And then you're only pulling somebody from the fire department in for a particular meeting or 2 or 3 or whatever to talk about those subjects so that they can be doing their day job and not sitting there when other stuff's being talked about. You know what I mean?
I think if the committee was cut down to the probably 5 or 6 members that are still on the committee, that would be fine. Because like you just said, we have been pulling in outside people when needed for various topics. We have, one of the things we tried to have our goal of the fall 2026, spring 2026 be our final meeting, but we were unable to get the articles in time to for the warrant for the Springtown meeting. We have about, I'm going to guess maybe 5 or 6 bylaws, probably too much for the fall town meeting, that I would love to bring forward and get addressed. We pretty much have everything we need done, except for maybe just to review a couple of wordings here and there. But without a committee, I'll be danged if I'm going to bring her in front of town meeting by myself and got hung by anybody who doesn't agree with it. I got hung enough.
Right.
Anything. So I would like to have, like I said, bring the committee down to the people that are presently still on it assigned, and we could probably finish up our work between the spring and fall town meetings coming up the next 2.
So I'll make a motion that we reduce the bylaw committee to the current 5 remaining members and authorize the committee to call in town personnel who are subject matter experts as needed.
Second.
And I think you're saying 5 voting members, right?
It'd be 5 total members.
But yeah, 5 total.
Oh, 5 total, yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
A second.
You second, oh, sorry. Motion by Molly, seconded by David. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Right. So we have some volunteer appointments and resignations. So we have 2 individuals are looking to join the Hadley Cultural Council. We have Jean Bird and Cynthia Wade.
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment to the Hadley Cultural Council for both Jean Berg and Cynthia Wade.
Second.
Motion by Molly, seconded by Jason. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we do have one resignation. Sue Oppenheimer would like to resign as member of the Hadley Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. That will be on Friday, August 7th.
Motion to accept.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Motion, I'll make a motion to accept Sue's resignation. And I'll second that, but I got a question.
Okay, motion by Jason, seconded by David.
So this is an elected position,
Yeah.
so we're just taking her resignation sort of under consideration. And the rest of this is going to be, the Hadley Housing Authority has asked for y'all to have a joint meeting with them. And they have someone who's actually interested in filling Sue's position. Apparently, he's been coming to meetings and Sue felt like she wasn't able to complete her term. And so tonight I'm asking, do you want to do the typical where we advertise the position and then have that person come in at a later date? So I understand they're not going to be available to come to a meeting until October 7th at any point, but there is another vacancy on there already. So would y'all like to? Okay. So, and then if that's okay, and then I'll have that individual make sure that they come to the October 7th meeting for y'all to meet them and discuss, and we'll do a joint meeting with the Hadley Housing Authority that evening. Okay.
But we're not holding a special election or anything like that to fill the seat. It's just going to be an appointed temporary.
Till the next annual town election, which will be in April.
Okay.
Which is how that always typically works.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, we haven't voted on it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, so moving on to 6.3, employee compensation equity policy. So we have uploaded here the employee compensation equity policy. This is just a draft, and which one of you wants to take it? You?
I will. So this is something that I have brought to y'all in an executive session, mentioning that this is something that was never really decided officially on during the compensation policy. So your non-union employees often are feeling they're in the dark on what they're supposed to have. The personnel policy handbook is in need of updating. But I think this policy would give the non-union employees a little bit of a guarantee of that this is they'll fall on the same wage scale. They'll receive the same benefits of the CBA that is on the wage scale with them. So to pick on Dee Dee, because she was here beside me this evening, she is on the same wage scale as the municipal employees union. So that way, since she's on the wage scale, have her move on just as anybody in the union would, and then receive the same benefits that they do. This is something that is very typical in other communities. I did due diligence and research. Most people have this in place or have had something like this in place for several years. So this is, again, just the first read in public that I would ask y'all to take into consideration. And if you have any questions or if you see anything that you'd like to be adjusted or you have edits that you'd like to recommend, I'm happy to take those on board and make them.
And I just want to add that, historically, and in the town, it sounds as if non-union employees didn't receive some of these benefits. And so unions would negotiate, step increases or cost of living adjustments, and non-union wouldn't for many years. And so this is really just trying to have that parity. And I think it is really important in terms of having, for staff morale and for just kind of transparency and being competitive as an employer.
And retention.
You don't want to vote or anything, this is just
No, this is the first read. Y'all have a first read, second read policy for policies.
Okay.
So this is the first one, and I'd ask you to take it up at your September 2nd meeting. Does anybody have any questions about it or? No. Okay. Thank you.
Very good, your report with your,
I was gonna spend another half an hour or so on I think,
No, you're not.
I was gonna point to two things on the schedule. Any changes are in red.
Mhm.
I'll make some more, October 7th, it sounds like it would be, have the housing authority here. It was also planned as having the planning board come to talk about kind of their priorities and what they've been working on. So that'll be a busy meeting. Like I said, I'd like to keep this updated and maybe I'll go out for another 6 months into June. Just so we can, kind of see major items. There haven't been too many changes since the last time. I just try to get the planning board in a little sooner. And then the schools are coming in on September 16th to talk about their capital planning needs and building needs, and Green Communities update on September 2nd. So otherwise still the same schedule. For my report, I uploaded it today. Let's go through it quickly. I think one thing that I worked with Paul Bockelman on was to get a luncheon with area town managers. I guess it had happened previously. David Nixon had helped coordinate it. And so we try to revive that, and we're going to try to meet every few months. It's up to maybe almost, like a dozen communities. Depends on who comes. It's there's no strict agenda, but it's just a great time to share ideas and to talk and, have follow up. And so I think just the other week, there were some good things that came out of that. Another one, the project coordinating team. So it's internal with staff. There's also representatives from planning board, conservation, and ZBA attend sometimes. Randy's there as a select board liaison. I think we're going to try meeting twice a month and really try to keep projects moving in coordination and communication between different permitting boards. And so, one thing is ideas to have a better transmittal form or a better process to receive information between departments. And so, what I've heard often is, the planning board is reviewing something and the fire department doesn't know about it and it gets permitted. And then they had a chance to review, infrastructure in terms of, say, fire flows or other things or hydrant locations. And so it's just trying to streamline that process. Coming up, I'm going to try to start meeting with more boards and committees. And, I've heard from a few people having some kind of newsletter or news brief for committees. And I think that'd be really important. It can just be a bulleted list, even just monthly, like here's what this board did, a few highlights, and put it online in the news or something on the website so people can see. There's a lot happening and it's really hard to keep track of it all. So just trying to, again, synthesize information and make it a little more readily available for folks would be important. For finance, I did mention the town has a great credit rating score, although I think it's going to be more challenging in the future. And so, I think we're in a good position to move forward. It's just to be aware of that. In terms of efficiencies, I've asked, departments to list their service plans and subscriptions. So what are the things that we pay for every year? Whether it's like for phones or different, we have a service for this or that. And is there a way to have efficiencies or combine things? Kind of Molly, to your point, sometimes like, is there a way, I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet, but something to do moving forward. For human resources, we kind of already talked about most of those. I think one thing I just want to address is that, there was the article in the Gazette about sharing fire personnel with Hatfield, and that's not really imminent. So I spoke with the Hatfield town administrator and with Bob, and it really was a high level conversation. It seems like the Gazette wrote an article that made it sound like it was like almost maybe like a detailed proposal. And that was never the intent of the conversation, is my understanding. And so, it's something that is really down the road in the future. So for anyone who read that, it's not as if it's something that's under consideration right now, by myself, right, or by you, the select board. Like we said, it could be in 6 months, whatever, a year. So at some point, maybe it's a conversation worth having for
6 decades, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to give the impression that this is something that we are working on actively. This is something-
Yeah, right. I just wanted to put that out there. For projects and initiatives, there's a few new things up top. Just to quickly, there's a natural disaster recovery program for farmers. So it's nothing for the town, it's for private individuals. I was just in a workshop this week and they mentioned it, and I just wanted to put it out there. Most owners may already be aware of it. It's for winter related or weather related losses in 23, 24. Applications are due by September 30th. So I just, I've let the Ag Commission know, just to try to get the word out. DER dam removal, the state had been out and looked at the reservoir dams and asked, could they be removed? And really the question is it a priority for, select board and for the town? There's an application round due pretty soon. I've talked to Scott and like we said, there's plenty of things to do. I don't know if this is something we want to pursue. What they said was, to remove all three at once. They don't think removing one at a time is a priority. So this Division of Ecological Restoration has said, well, if it's a project, the town should look at removing, the three dams all at once as a project. So that's just, this is the grant cycles are this fall. So, we don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight. We have, it is due the 4th. It's a pretty straightforward application. I just wanted to put that out there. I don't have one opinion either way on it. Town fiber project. So Bob is trying to wrap up what the fire department's been doing. Working with Kyle, and then, we'll assess where we are, whether that's talking to, our current vendor for software and support or others, and seeing how we can finish that up. A lot of these, there's been no change. I think the one that is solar on the landfill. So there are funds available to enter into, there's about $6,000 remaining. And, Power Options is a nonprofit organization allowed by the state to work with communities and negotiate power agreements. And so I think in the past, Hadley had agreed for a 1-year contract for an amount of, about $1,000 or $600. The question is, would the select board want to enter into another contract with Power Options to do this? And so I can't find that there was ever authorization. It was discussed a while ago now. I think it was maybe in 2024 with the select board. And I think it could be a future discussion at a next meeting. This is a project that is active. And I think, this is probably a better route to go, is to have Power Options basically be a consultant and our negotiator for a fee for your annual contract amount. I don't, if short of that, it's like, myself trying to figure it all out, and it's too complicated and would take up a lot of time. So they're kind of in the best position. Those are kind of project updates. For department updates, I just want to, this is the second meeting of the month. Just want to highlight a few things. The Council on Aging will soon put out their September, October newsletter. It's a really big effort for them. It'll be online. It lists a calendar of events. It lists a lot of things. It's a big undertaking. For the fire department, they are, getting caught up in plan review and inspections, which is great. They're trying to get more things online. So they're meeting with Unipay, the provider, to take online payments to try to streamline that, to get, permit applications available electronically and then pay online. And they're continuing to interview for positions. Bob did highlight a few concerns where, looking ahead at this fiscal year, he thinks there could be some overruns on the budget. Just, he's alerting us now. I said, work with what you have, try to save dollars where you can, and then if you need to, come back. But, at this point, the budget is what it is. Parks and Recreation, they have their summer movie series. There's one tonight. I think it's Jumanji happening right now. Youth soccer is really a really big program. It involves a lot of families. I think it's a nice opportunity. That's something that's happening a lot right now. They also have some fall programming, and as the last bullet said, trying to get a walking club or something. Again, it's a great way to get the community out and involved and meeting other folks. For the police department, they're interviewing for a new detective. They're still working through the hiring process for the 2 officers. So they're busy doing that. For Public Works, Chapter 90 funds are becoming available, as are some other funding, coming up with a paving schedule for the next year. There's still a few culvert projects waiting. So there's this East Street Culvert grant, which will hopefully be getting this fall and completed next year. And they continue to apply for grants. I think, as the vacancies alluded to, there's been some challenges with, hiring staff and staff retention at Public Works. And so Jennifer and I are going to be meeting with Scott and others in the next few weeks to address some of that. school department. There's, some grants and some awards and accolades happening. They're, with their staff and with their teachers, they work really hard to, supplement funding and to seek recognition for their students and what they do. I think that's really important. And then there's my weekly updates. I won't go into any detail there. I just want to jump back to personnel. I think in my report, and as mentioned, I think at a future select board meeting, there can be an agenda topic about department structure. So, really what's happening with the assessor's office, treasurer collector, town administrator's office with budgeting. And so, it may happen in an executive session, but then an open session. And so there's been some discussions, I think, especially with Kim's resignation, it'd be really important to move fast in terms of those two departments. And then, with Linda's retirement, we've talked about having, whether it's a budget analyst or something there, again, having those discussions about how we want to see the structure within, say, the town administrator's office or in another office. So I think those will be important discussions to have at a next meeting. I hate to do it, but Jennifer, I've even said, could there be another meeting off cycle? Knowing Kim's last day is this week, is it, could it be a daytime meeting to have some of these discussions about the department structures? If we wait to the next meeting, there's a lot happening on the 2nd. I'd like to move fast and try to get, job descriptions finalized and positions advertised, especially in some departments. And so, it's kind of it's your discretion for the board, but, I think we're ready to move if given the direction.
So you're going to be sending us a text or something to
Yes.
schedule? Okay.
Yep. Or we could right now, we could just sort of say next Wednesday at noon or next Wednesday at 4:30. We could do it fully remote.
For me, it's kind of hard to do the new meetings. I prefer like a 4:30 like we did like a few weeks ago. That's just me. I'm only.
I'm just saying 4:30, and it could be fully Zoom. There, we don't have to.
That would be.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here. I'll be on vacation. So Zoom is the way I'll be participating, but I couldn't do it.
With the 4 members here, is 4:00 on Wednesday acceptable?
I can do 4. That sure.
Would later be better, David or Jason?
I mean,
Well, how like 4:35?
yeah,
I'm thinking 4:30 or 5, not like it just to,
Okay.
if 5's better, then let us know.
I'm fine with 4:30 if that's.
Yeah,
too early for you,
4:30 is
then I
fine.
can do 5. Okay.
4:30 on whatever next Wednesday is.
26th.
26th. Yeah.
Zoom.
It's
Well,
fully Zoom or in person?
Fully Zoom.
Okay.
I think with an extra meeting, I think it's just easier to do Zoom.
Yeah.
So.
May I make a motion? Is it that time?
Oh, no, wait, we have to do liaison.
Oh, we skipped that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry. And I'm sorry to say I have something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm done with my.
All right, so we're gonna move to 8.1, select board liaison reports.
So I just had one as a liaison to the fire department. I was just asked to articulate a reminder. It went out on social media, I think, but I think people are being caught unawares that there is an existing fire department policy that says if you have a dumpster on your property, there is a $25 fee, and it does require notification to the fire department. You have to get an actual permit and post the permit just as you would a building permit if you have a project going on. I think a lot of people thought that this was something new. It's not. It's actually Nate, I think you said, oh yeah, I mean, in other towns they've been doing this. I think it was just with staffing or whatever. Here it isn't something that was being pursued on a regular basis. I unfortunately happened to be getting a dumpster when I found all of this out, but I'm happy to report that Heidi pointed me to the website. The information is all there. It was very easy to follow. It was very easy to pay the $25 fee. So anyway,
And I'll just say quickly, there is a distance to a house or structure, so I've known instances where the dumpster is put down and then a fire comes out, they might ask it to be moved. And so just, if you're thinking about it, try to figure out first where to put it. So you're with it, you're the right step back away from a structure.
So I went to the library trustees meeting last week. I don't have anything that we haven't already figured out, to report. And then my mom was here today for the County Historical Commission and the liaison for that. And I was at that meeting on Monday. Yeah. All right. Any item? No. I was gonna say future agenda items. I think we're pretty jam packed for the next little while. But if there's anything that anyone wants to add to the after town meeting future. No. Great. And do you want to do it?
Sure.
Well,
What?
there was an executive session item.
Yeah.
That's where we're going.
That's-
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
That's what I'm moving to.
Okay, yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2 to conduct strategy session in preparation for potential negotiations with non-union personnel, the police chief, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town, if the chair so declares, and we will not reconvene in open session. Second.
All right, motion by David, seconded by Jason. As chair of the Hadley Select Board, I state that the board has moved and seconded to enter into executive session. And I state that discussing the matter in open session will have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the town of Hadley. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Roll call vote, Bill,
Yes.
Keegan.
Yes.
Parsons
Yes.
and Costick.
Yes.
Thank
All right,
you.
good night, everyone. We'll see you on September 2nd.